Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Connor, I'm the founder of the Unicorn Factory, and today I am going to be breaking down how I allow freelancers on the Unicorn Factory to update their profiles themselves. This has been one of the most requested tutorials, the most asked question ever since I've posted my How to Build a Marketplace Without Code tutorial. And I am happy to say that after hours of filming and editing this, I am ready to show you how it works. So please put your phone on flight mode, get a pen and paper. You might have to watch this a few times, but let's dive into it. So let's start off by me showing you how it works. So right now we're looking at one of the freelancer profile pages, which is my own actually. And we have here some dynamic content, which is the rates that a user can update, the availability, the bio, case studies that are listed in a user's profile, and the individual skill tags or service tags that a freelancer can list in their profiles. So if a user wants to update their profile, all they need to do is click on My Account, go to the Settings tab, click on Update Profile, and then click on Refresh Profile. What that will do is it will redirect them to an Airtable form where they can just go ahead and fill out all the information that they want to update, including their profile picture, their job title, their bio, what services they offer, their LinkedIn link, and their portfolio link. If a user decides that they do not want to change their profile picture, then all they need to do is just leave the attachment file for the profile picture and the update form blank. So once a user has filled out the update profile form, all they need to do is click on Submit for Review, and that is where the automation starts. Cool, so now that a freelancer has submitted all that information, now what we need to do is approve it, and then once approved, trigger the automation that overrides the existing Webflow content, the existing Airtable content, and potentially also the Memberstack content for that particular user. But before we start with the automation side of things, I'm going to need to show you how you actually set up the form and how you set up the backend of Airtable in order to make sure that the data transfer between Webflow, Airtable, and Memberstack happens smoothly. Cool, so this is a view that you might be looking at for your freelancers. Right now it's only me in here, and the table is currently set up the way that I explained it in the freelancer onboarding system. So you've got a user's current status, you've got their email, you've got their first name, you've got their job title, photo, Webflow item ID and Airtable item ID, which is going to be super important for the next few steps. Then we've also got the bio, skills, and location. So a user will fill out all of this information when they sign up initially. So the secret to allowing a user to update their profile is to basically trigger the overriding of old information. In order to figure out what information to override, we need to ask the user, which is where we create the Airtable form. And so I'm going to start off by showing you how to create the Airtable form. So first, create a brand new table, and we're going to call this table User Updates. Now, inside of this table, we want to add all the fields that we want to allow the user to override. So once you've added all the fields that you want to allow your user to update, your table should look somewhat like this, and it should actually be quite similar to your original user table. Now there are two more fields that are super important to add. Firstly, we want to add a linked field referencing the original profile that we are going to update. So we're going to create a linked field that links back to the original table. And when they ask you to add a lookup field, just pick Webflow item ID and pick Airtable ID. And then just click Add to Fields and you should be all good. Next, what you need to do is you need to add a drop down for the status. Next, you want to give the status three options. One's going to be review, the next one's going to be approved, and this one, and the last one is, let's call it done. Once we've completed all of those steps, what we want to do is we want to convert this table here into a form. So just click on form, call it update form, and then your form should look something like this. Now, the first tip that I'll give you is remove the user, because if a user is looking at the form, they will be able to see all of the users that are currently sitting in your database. So say on the Unicorn Factory, I have 550 freelancers, which means that they'll automatically see this, and they'll also automatically see all the other ones. So the way we get around it is by removing the user field and instead adding a new field called email. I like to move the email field to the top. I will also remove the name field because that is not the actual user's name, it's the name of the record ID. And then I'm also going to remove the status field, which should leave you with a form that allows a user to add their email, add their new updated job title, add their photo, add an updated bio, and select the skills and location. So that is the first important step that you've done. So now that this form is created, you can in theory put it on your freelancer dashboard like I have, or you can even send it to your users by email. And whenever they fill out that form, you can take them through the process of updating their profile. So I'm going to show you specifically what the user experience looks like when they fill out the form now. So let's assume that Conatest@Gmail wants to update their profile. Now this is what they would do. They would update their job title, add an image, they would add a bio, and all the new skills that they want added to their profile, as well as a location. And then all they need to do is click the submit button, and all of that information that they just submitted will be sent to the user updates table inside of Airtable. One thing that I am going to quickly show everyone is what I do to create record IDs. So we're going to call this one updates ID. All you need to do is click on formula, click rec, select record ID, and what that will do is it will automatically populate the Airtable record ID for this particular record in that particular table. Now, you might have noticed that the user table and the status field is currently empty. And so we need to populate that somehow. So you can do that manually, or you can use Airtable Automations to automatically populate it. So all you need to do to create the Airtable automation is click on Automations, click on Create Automation, and then go Populate Update Record Fields. Now, again, the way that Airtable Automations works is very similar to Zapier. In fact, you could use Zapier to do the same thing. However, because it's still running inside of Airtable and you're only updating a record within Airtable and not on any other platforms, it actually makes more sense just to use Airtable Automations. So the way you do it is you pick your trigger, and the trigger that we're going to pick is when a record is created. Then we pick the table, which in our case is user updates. We run a test. Test ran successfully. You can actually see down here what record it was, and we can already see, yeah, it's got all of our information in there. So we're going to click done. And then what we want to do is we want to add an action, and the action that we're going to choose here is we're going to update a record. Then it asks us what table is that record in. It's in user updates. And then it asks us to dynamically populate the record ID. So all we need to do is click the blue plus button, go back to step 1, because it is this record that we want to update, and that is the record that triggered the automation. Then we just click on record ID and it will automatically populate. Now the question is, what fields do we want to update? So the first field that we want to update is the user field. So we just scroll down, select user, and then when it asks us to choose the field, what we want to use is, in step 1, the email field. So the email field is what the user submitted right when they filled out the form, and now we want to send this information here into the user field because that user already exists in the user table with that particular email. Another field that we want to update is the status field. So we're going to just change that into review. So you can just type in review. Then we click done. Then we click run test, and then you can see how it automatically populates the information. Cool, so now we've pretty much got the basics set up. We've got a user table with all the information of our existing users, and we've got a user update table, which means that when a freelancer fills out the profile update form, that all that information gets sent there. Now what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to get that information from the user update table into the user table in Airtable, but also into Webflow and all the other platforms that you want to update. And in order to do that, we're going to be using Zapier. And again, with Zapier, we need to define a trigger and an action. So the next step that we need to focus on is defining the trigger inside of Airtable. Cool, one last thing actually before we go to setting up the trigger. One thing that I do recommend doing is when you are setting your actions, always add a Slack message as a notification that you can send to one of your channels, only because that way you can get notified when a freelancer or one of your users requests a profile update. And also make sure that the automation is turned on, because if it's not turned on, people will be filling out all the information and Airtable won't be updating it. So it's that button in the top right corner. Cool, so next up, we need to define our trigger. And our trigger is going to be when a record moves from the review stage into the approved stage. So let's go and set that up. Firstly, I like to move the status right to the beginning because I kind of feel like that's where it belongs, but you can leave it wherever you want. So what we want to do is we want to create a new view by clicking on the grid button in the bottom left, and what we're going to call this is we're going to call this the approved view. And now in order to make sure that only the relevant records are in this view, we want to apply a filter and we want to say that the status is approved. So now what it will do is it will filter out all records that are currently not in the approved stage. And then, and this is where the magic of views happens, when I change the update record here that connortest@gmail submitted from review to approved, what happens is it moves it into that view, and now I can use Zapier to make that the trigger, and that's what we're gonna do now. Cool, so now we're back in my actual Zapier account with the existing Zap set up as it's currently running, and I just want to talk you through each individual step. So as we defined, we have a new record in view, which is in the profile updates table when a record is moved into the approved view. Now, if you saw last week's video with my freelancer onboarding process, you'll know that if you want to send rich text or to Webflow, what you need to do is you need to convert the Airtable markdown in the bio section into HTML, and that is what happens in step number 2. Now, someone asked how exactly I do it. It is, you just choose the formatter by Zapier event, you choose action as your text, as your action event is your text, and then when you select the transform, you select convert markdown to HTML, and then in the input, you just drop from the record number 1, from your first step in the trigger, the bio field. So in my case here, it would be this field here that I would convert from markdown into HTML, and then you can send that data to Webflow. So the third step that I want to take is I want to update the original record inside of Airtable. So in our example, we want to update this user here. Now, the reason why it's important to update that record is because when you use tools like Parabola to sync platforms between each other, you want to make sure that this information is as up to date as it could possibly be. So that includes any updates that a user requests get sent over there. Once Airtable has updated, now what I want to do is I want to update the Webflow item. And now the way that that works is that you just go ahead, select the update live item in Webflow, and it will ask you to select your site, your profile, and then also your Webflow item ID. You will have to dynamically populate that Webflow item ID, but you can get it from your user updates field that you got in step 1 from the Webflow item ID lookup. And it's for that reason, friends, that you need to store your Webflow item ID inside of Webflow, inside of Airtable. Otherwise, you will not be able to update it. So always make sure that when you link in your users to also use a lookup for the Webflow item ID and for the Airtable ID so that you can make these updates in Zapier. Next up, I have set up a custom request for the skills and services that I now want to send to Webflow. Again, this is a bit more of an advanced thing that I'll cover in a future video. And then last but not least, I just send an email notification to the freelancer letting them know that I have made the update to their profile and they'll be good to go. Cool, so that is how I do user profile updates through Unicorn Factory on my Webflow site. And you know, it does the trick. It's a bit of a hack clearly, but as long as it works, it works. And I think that if allowing users to update their profile is something that is incredibly important, then this is hopefully a way that you can do it. Now, one thing that I would say about profile updates is, you know, this is like a real fancy way of doing it or a highly automated way of doing it. But you know, before setting up all of the automation, like one thing that you could do is just send people a link to the form instead of hiding it behind like membership sites and all that kind of stuff, and just follow that methodology of collecting information and then using that information to override certain fields. I also use a similar strategy when it comes to updating case studies, but that there is a bit more complicated because one user can have multiple case studies, but I'll cover that sometime in 2027 or something like that. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I would love to know what you thought about it. Like if this is how you thought I did it, if you have any other ways that you want to do it, if there was any parts of it that confused you, then yeah, just let me know in the comments. A, I love answering these questions, and B, I hear comments is fantastic for the search algorithm. Be sure to have liked and subscribed to this video and subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you back here for the next one. Bye.